Oh, 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 oh.
Welcome to Multiple O's, the spin-off podcast for The O Show. The O Show is hosted by Dr. Oriana Fox, the artist with a PhD in self-disclosure. You hopefully know the spiel by now. If you're interested in candid confessions, creativity, nonconformity, and mental health, you've come to the right place. This, my friends, is season 2 of this podcast, which explores the crossover between working on the self and working to change the world. Have you ever said to yourself, I love that Oriana Fox makes art all the time? Well, if you have, now you can say it with your wallet. Go to patreon.com/Oriana Fox and support this lovely podcast and artist.
Hello, this is Oriana. Thank you for tuning in to Multiple O's. You know the deal. This is another in a long series of interviews I did on Instagram back in May 2021, which I have edited for your listening pleasure. This week's guest is the artist Jet Moon, who I introduce at the start of the interview, which is going to start now. Enjoy. Hello, and we're live. I'm your host, Oriana, and I'm thrilled to be introducing my next guest, who I've been a fan of for I feel like decades, because they have been practicing for at least 25 years. They are a queer, working class, disabled, identified artist working across performance, zine making, facilitating workshops, activism, you name it, they have done it and excelled as a voice for resistance and change and rejection of the status quo. So without further ado, I would love to welcome Jet Moon.
Hey, Oriana.
Hello.
We're actually here. We've got technology to work. It's a miracle. Wow. Imagine if technology actually did the things that we thought it was going to.
Well, it's working so far. So far, so good. Fingers crossed, everything will go smoothly. So thank you so much for making time to speak with me this evening. So let's start with just, as I mentioned in introducing you, that you've worked across all these different art forms, and I'm just wondering what appeals to you most, or why is it that you've worked in so many different arenas? Explain to me your multi-talentedness.
I thought about this a little bit, and I think that there's a few different reasons. So like back in the 80s, in the olden days, when I started making work, I originally was a photographer, and a lot of that was around economy. You know, it was what I could afford. I bought like an old camera for like £85, and somebody gave me a lot of out-of-date film. So I had like loads of resources that I could use. And then at a certain point, I couldn't afford to do it, even though I had all this small resources. And that's when I started to perform, because this was the medium that I had. You know, I had my body and I could start to make work with that because it didn't cost anything. It was a bit shocking because suddenly I was working in something that was completely ephemeral. And I'd do a show and I'd be like, oh, but where has it gone? And I had formerly had these solid things. But the other thing that was a huge influence on like working in like tons of different media was that I belonged to a collective where we would, you know, you'd go somewhere and be like, oh, okay, today I'm going to play the cello with a group of people, even though I've never done that before. And just this very exploratory way of making art together and doing different things. And so I was really encouraged to try a lot of different things, but I'm one of those people, I think that the work has to do its work. You know, I'm not just here like twiddling around. I mean, yeah, art as recreation, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm a political artist, and so I try to choose what's going to work in the situation that I'm in. So, for example, when I went to Belgrade and I started working with Queer Belgrade Collective, we formed that group. It was like, okay, well, how can I communicate with a group of people who don't necessarily want like a lot of hard politics. I'm bored by that kind of message. And so like we started to make this very comedic cabaret. I was writing from people's stories, right, directing people to perform and having fun in a really scary and dangerous situation, but still talking about the message, you know, still getting that across. And finally, about this thing of like the constellation of forms, I think it might be associated with some neurodivergent stuff. Like there's an artist called Ashok Mistry, and he wrote a great article particularly about dyslexic artists, but I think it applies more broadly, where he's talking about how sometimes curators can't understand that you're bouncing across all these different media, and to you it makes perfect sense. There's a through line. It's like, of course that follows that, but maybe for a more traditional way of looking at things, people are like, what are you doing? It's like, well, I'm working, I'm doing my work. It all makes sense to me.
I think a lot of artists from marginalized identity positions tend to have something called a disoeuvre, like a something that's not quite, it's not in keeping with maybe our idea of a canonical artist's oeuvre, you know, because lives shift and are affected by, you know, all these wider, you know, systems and structures and politics, and that inevitably means that, anyway, I don't know, I'm babbling. But this concept of disoeuvre, I want to just give credit to, it's Felicity Allen who coined the term. But so maybe your work fits within that concept. But I'm just wondering, do you have a preference, though, for a certain mode of working? Or is it just about, as you articulated, like communicating most effectively your political message, your critique?
I think that probably the most favorite thing for me is when I can really feel the contact between myself and an audience, or between myself and a community. I think performance is a very immediate way of doing that, because you can have those moments, or I've had those moments when the audience is making me levitate through their energy, and it becomes like that feedback loop where they give you something and you therefore are like, you know, boosted, and you can give something back. So I think that's wonderful. I think I enjoy that. But I've been writing a lot over the last few years and developing like collaborative writing processes. Just done this series of survivor writing workshops where it's a peer-to-peer format. So it's not like a hierarchy of someone being an expert, but it's this shared space. And that was that was really powerful.
It was. I attended the reading, and I received. I have the book. And I treasure it, and I love the fact that it arrived in this glittery green envelope. It was a lovely touch, and I love a lot of the participants, their writing. Could you share a bit more about like the content of that project and your role? I mean, you said it was non-hierarchical, but could you say a little bit about facilitating that?
Yeah. So I've been writing a book for, like too long, maybe the last 4 years. And I started that through the Shape Arts Disabled Writers group, which was at the Tate Modern. And that was a really great space. And from that, I just started to think about how much I wanted to have a peer-to-peer survivor writing space, or just really a peer-to-peer survivor space, because I hadn't had that, and I'd had lots of really frustrating experiences with trying to, talk to professionals or not even being able to find anybody to talk to. And also for me, creative work has been literally a lifesaver. Like, it is one of the ways where I've been like, okay, make a choice, right? Make something. That's how I get through things, So life or death, like like that intense of a choice. So with Playing with Fire, I had this great relationship with Spread the Word, and I was able to get some Arts Council funding. And I think one of the things about having funding is that it means that you have resources. And for me, it meant that I could have an access worker who frees me up and helps me to be able to do lots of things. And so organising that peer-to-peer space, what I really wanted was something where it's not about a writing workshop. It's not like, oh, we're going to learn how to make amazing sentences, because obviously I'm not really that great at stringing together sentences all the time. It's very fragmentary with me. But it was more about how will we be together in a space? How will we have an opportunity to see each other, to hear what each other has to say, and build like a resonance of knowledge that values people being an authority in their own story, because I think there's a real lack of spaces that allow people that, or even that tell people that message that, you can be powerful. And being in that space was quite extraordinary for me. Like, obviously I was the facilitator, spent a lot of time researching how to make that space the best and most safe container that it could be. But when I was in those workshops, what I realized was that I hadn't had that space. And so as I was hearing people share their experiences, things were happening for me. Like, I was going like, oh my God, yes, oh wow, and like really learning things each time people spoke. Or even just the thing that people often came with a lot of emotion, and for them to even be approaching the idea of writing about trauma or having a space where we would speak together as survivors, like, people really came with a lot from the very beginning. And so it felt like something like a cross between a therapeutic space and a creative space. But then why not, like, why not have that? And I think it's a great thing to combine those things. But also the other element is the kind of intense political messages. I felt that the writing that was produced wasn't just about a kind of chest-bearing, confession about the past. It was really a directed, pointed critique of, capitalism, gender binary, like, I'm just laughing.
Racism.
I'm laughing at you say it, because I'm thinking particularly of Dolly Sen's piece.
Yes.
The fuck normal manifesto. And as she was reading that in the reading, where it was like, fuck people who think that witches are bad, but not the people who burned them, fuck heterosexuality, like this huge kind of ongoing, really rousing chorus of I just felt like we were all just going to be like, yes.
I know, yes.
Riot.
Yeah.
And also Ayatollah If's piece, like this on the gender binary and racism. Yeah.
So we have some idea of the resistance in your work and what it is resisting. And this last year has been a really tough year for lots of people. And I was wondering if you could speak a bit about some recent projects you've done. I mean, other than that survivor writing workshop, the piece you've done about sex work, which the name of it is now, I'm drawing a blank. The piece I wanted to talk to you about.
The film is called Hello Sir.
Hello Sir.
Yeah, and
yes.
It was an online collaborative residency with Live Art Development Agency. So at the beginning of lockdown, when all of the funding disappeared, Arts Council England actually closed all their funding rounds, and and I think lots of artists were just going like, okay, what are we doing? But I think what happened was that a lot of small funds opened up. And that was really great. So I applied to them, and I guess I'd been thinking about making this film for a while. And through working for probably about the last decade as a webcam dominatrix, and part of that is about finding work as a disabled person with a pretty intense energy deficit that I could do from my house, you know. So, but across those 10 years, I'd accumulated something like, I don't know, 130 pay-per-view porn clips, which, yeah, I found that this work was such a revelation in terms of getting to know the underbelly of sexuality, like what's going on in heterosexuality out there. And I found that there was like this massive genre of enforced homosexuality, which I had lots of clips which were about homo conversion therapy, but not that kind. Like the kind of like making
right the other, you know, the opposite to the conventional,
making people be gay. And people were super keen on this, and it's not like I invented the genre, it's there. And also so-called enforced cross-dressing, you know, where of course I mean I'm just there, I'm the service provider. Someone comes and they're like, do you want to see my outfit? I'm like, do I want to turn on the cam and see what they're wearing? I'm like, yeah, sure I do. And I would have also some really intimate conversations with people at times, because that is the point of the title of the film. It's called Hello Sir, because I did have quite a few clients who would see me as like a dyke, as a genderqueer person, and the title comes from a regular client coming into my cam room and saying, hello sir, and I'd just reply, hello you little homo slut, like typing. And we'd just go off on a groove, you know, and just really be having a pretty cool time, like chatting filth together. But the film is so using a collection, like some cuts from this porno stuff, but interspersed with myself in drag. So in a kind of high femme drag, and talking about gender, talking about how weird heterosexuality is, talking about sexism within the queer world, talking about femme invisibility, talking about all this. And I think wishing to pull apart the idea that it's like gay or straight, man or woman, masculine or feminine, you like that. And these worlds are really enmeshed and like pinging off of each other. And there's a lot more going on than just some kind of, the division is really not there, or highly fetishized in a way that completely fucks the division over.
Yeah, and that the you know, that gender and sexuality aren't necessarily locked in some kind of you know, relationship to one another. They can, you know, they're kind of separate. They're related, but they're separate entities. They don't necessarily. There's no causal relationship that we can pin down on them. But
I guess I also just wanted to talk a bit to like the idea of like it's not a degendered thing, and it's also not an easy sum. It's not like X plus Y equals oh people are therefore doing this. It's like it's really complicated on lots of levels. People are doing really multifaceted things in the way they relate to sexuality and gender. People fetishize things, but then for some people it's a way of coming out. Lots of different stuff.
Yeah, I was wondering, about the clients for this conversion therapy. Are they, I mean, obviously it's a mediated interaction and you don't necessarily know them in any way outside that context. But yeah, do you have a sense of, are they wanting to express that side of themselves? So a coming out kind of thing.
For some people, that's the place where they can have that and where they do begin that exploration. It's like, for some people, maybe it's just one thing where they like jerk off once a week and it's like, I wore this, or I talked about this, and that's as far as it goes. And for other people, it's about moving into who they are and like finding a place, or it might be moving backwards and forwards. I mean, this is not just about straight people, so-called straight people. This exists in the queer world. All this playing with gender, playing with roles. This happens in the dyke world as well. It's not,
Yeah, but I think what you're highlighting though is the role of the sex worker as a kind of therapist in a way, like to bring therapy up again, but or at least providing a kind of emotional labor, and some, I don't know, on some level for the client.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real and just say that really I'm there because I need to pay the rent and I must pay the bills, and and a lot of my work is about like not looking bored and staying on my riff and getting a sense of what my client actually wants me to do. So if I was going to become a therapist, I'd just become a therapist. But but there, so
Yeah.
But I mean there is intimate listening involved for sure, and sometimes you can actually have a pretty sexual experience. I'm all for the weird, like, yeah.
I don't know what to follow it up. Weird in what sense? What does weird mean?
I'm just really curious about like what's happened in your mind there, where I was like, this happens in the queer world, and I could just see.
Well, I was just sort of like, well, duh. I was kind of like, well, duh. I don't know. I just thought it was weird that you were saying it, like I should be surprised it happens in the queer world. I just thought, of course. I mean, I don't know. Like I was kind of like, yeah.
But
I think it's more surprising that it happens in the straight world as opposed to the queer world. I guess that's what the expression on my face was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I thought, isn't it the other way around, that I'm not supposed to expect it in the straight world, but expect it in the queer world? I don't know.
Yeah, I think talking about like some other meta levels that maybe we haven't quite.
Yeah. So could you say more about the invisibility of femmes in queer contexts, or could you say more about that?
Yeah, in the world in general.
In the world in general, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this today, and I mean, I never feel invisible as a queer person. When I'm walking down the street, I just feel like myself, and I'm like, oh, it's obvious that I'm queer. And I remember, like, God, such a long time ago, but when gay marriage started to happen, going into like a newsagent's, and it was the marriage of Elton John was on the cover of like some women's magazine, like laying on the counter there. And myself, feeling obviously queer, said to the shopkeeper, oh, so what do you think about this then? And I was saying it as a queer person, and they replied to me as thinking I was straight, and like, oh yeah, I'm not really too sure about this. And I was thinking that I was having this conversation like, isn't it cool? Like that we're,
right.
I mean, even though I'm not like that much for gay marriage, but if it's something that you can't have, it's a celebration when it kind of arrives. And I guess I'm surprised, and sometimes I'm really shocked when that invisibility happens. And then I think that there are bubbles going on where, to some people, it's obvious that I am screaming femme and that I'm obviously a big old queer. And that can happen in the street. That can happen in those interactions where you just see each other and it's like, hello. I mean, it happened to me today where I saw another person and we just clocked each other and was like, hi, just in that sensing and knowing and affirming.
So it's like a code, like almost like a cruising code.
I don't think this was. I mean,
I don't know if it's a code. Maybe that's.
I don't think there was that much cruising going on at the bus stop, but I think it was more like the novelty of being outside,
right.
After a lockdown and a pandemic, and I have really missed that communication through clothes and being, and just that silent kind of communication amongst people. But I think that I mean, I get most pissed about femme invisibility, or the way that femmes are not looked out for properly within the queer world, because I guess I expect something better. And I think that as a stage performer, I've often tried to say something more complex about what it is to be a femme person, and to go a bit deeper than those stereotypes.
And yes, I've seen some of your early performance, like kind of club performances, talking about sort of like vanilla lesbian sex or I got this memory of a performance where you talk about like wearing overalls and I don't know, a kind of a shift or whatever.
Oh yeah, that's Feminism 101.
Oh, Feminism 101. Yeah.
Reading from the oh God, now I'm going to have a blank on what the book is called, but it's a book that describes lesbian sex, and nothing happens. It just ends up by saying there may be kissing. That's it. But I think that exploding the idea of passivity or only being receptive, or just really like the feminine stereotype but converted to being gay. And not that there are like awesome femmes who are also submissive, but there's a power in that. Dorothy Allison has some really amazing writing about being a femme submissive. And I think that she also was part of that, like the lesbian sex wars, like way back when being femme, being butch or femme was really put down. That whole kind of working class movement was erased as somehow like incorrect, and also SM was really off the cards. And it's a kind of a thing that's going on now a lot as well. Whether again there's like this whole attack on trans people, the attack on like something beyond a kind of like bland, fucking sexless, horrific, far right. Oh God, it's so depressing. Yeah.
Let's not go down the depressing route.
Light. Yeah.
No, we can't go down the depressing route. It's just that it's been a difficult day.
I'm sorry. Do you want to tell me about that?
It's okay. I'd really rather talk about you. So, what was I going to ask you? I'm really, really going blank now. I will just giggle my way back into the conversation. Well, because we went back to the older, previous kind of performance. Oh yeah, so you've talked about being sort of misrecognized. Yes. So I guess that interaction at the bus stop of being recognized is how you want to be recognized. Is it? Being seen?
Yeah, I think being seen is a really powerful thing for anybody. That's a huge part of the work that I do, is about making these spaces for marginalized groups to like see themselves, because people are often critical of this idea of like preaching to the choir, preaching to the converted, but the thing is that if you are a marginalized person, it's really tiring to always be outgoing, to always be trying to, tell other people, fight for change, or even fight to like keep things that you've already got. And so I have spent a lot of time making like kind of nourishing spaces, or spaces where people can tell our history, because that gets lost and people don't really feel that they have anything to build on, and so I think in terms of being seen, I think that the SM Dyke world would be one place where I feel really seen. You can kind of go out there, you can present yourself in a certain way. I think the clubs, like some of the queer clubs, like Whatever, was very important. In those early days when we were like back at Central Station, and it was quite a small group of people that would gather there, but it had a real sense of like walking into a scene where people got to know each other over time and really actually know each other. And lots of people were not having their own identities reflected to them in a positive way by the external world. And so it was that place where we kind of held each other. But I think invisibility is quite sometimes there's just actually not a lot that I can do about the lack of recognition from people who aren't part of my own social world. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, you just articulated why it's, it feels good to be in spaces in which, surrounded by your peers, or I don't know what the right word is, your community. But what have you done that is that role that you spoke about that can be exhausting, of like speaking to people who disagree or who are not part of that community, who may not recognize you and see you? Like, can you give some examples of having done that?
In terms, I think it's not really particularly in terms of queer stuff, but like I spent like quite a long time working on no borders things. So like visiting women in the Yarlswood detention centre, going on demonstrations against border controls, and even just doing like phone support where you're trying to get like people basic medical care within these detention centres. Watching, seeing people being deported, seeing people being really intensely mentally ill or physically ill in these spaces, and it's like they're offered like a paracetamol or ignored, or just, I mean, that is a really terrifying kind of invisibility. And it's also, I find that there's a lot of burnout in this kind of activism, where there's so much, you can never do enough. It's impossible to meet the need that there is. And it is overwhelming to see the horrible state. I mean, we're doing so well in keeping things light right now, I'd like to mention. But that's stuff where, I did that for quite a while, and I was just like, I'm empty. Like my physical health is just like, and I need to do something else. I think maybe more simple kind of stuff was like maybe being on the front line of demonstrations, like doing that kind of stuff, where I was just like, you know what, my health is such that maybe I am going to make some different choices about what my activism looks like. I'm going to shape the things that only I can do and that are about my really specialized skills. And it's still activism, and it's still direct action, but it is, maybe it's not quite so visible. And again, I will bring that around to the survival writing. I think it's huge to talk about our trauma. It's huge to have a space to heal, to have a creativity as a way to approach subjects, and people are also producing really beautiful work and empowering work. Like, as you said, it's not in this kind of thing of like, oh, so terrible things happened, or just it's not like purely telling. Like, people are making really enraged or evocative stuff that casts a spell or draws up power. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that I decided to place myself in, because I can't at this point have my creativity be a destructive force in my life. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the reason I was kind of bringing up COVID and the pandemic, because I think that it's made things more accessible for disabled people in some ways. And I just wondered if you could speak about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, everything has to be qualified, and I think that there are some people who haven't gelled with the online format. But I know that for myself, it has been amazing because so many people were on online platforms. Like, I was doing lots of my socializing online before COVID, and I was quite indoors a lot of the time. I very, very limited energy to go outside and socialize. I also didn't have very much money, So And when everybody was online, it was amazing because it was like, oh, I'm going to a queer dance party. I'm going to go and see Ron Athy talk. You know, I'm going to go to this workshop. I'm going to take part in these things. And
things that disabled people have been asking for for probably forever, for things to be made accessible. It took a pandemic to make some of that happen.
But also in terms of travel, suddenly all these international meetings could happen where it's like, oh, so we didn't actually have to fly to there. Oh, you mean that we can have the live stream, and then people keep talking about this like going back to normal, which I just feel like a fuck off, because whose normal are we talking about? It's like, oh, so you mean I just should go back to like being cut off from lots of cultural activity, even though I am a cultural producer.
Yeah.
And that was another thing in the workshops. Some people were like, oh, this is the most people I've seen in a year. And just that thing, it's possible. It is possible to create inclusive spaces. Again, just it's not even that. It's not difficult to have like subtitling on things. It's, people are like, oh, it's so expensive. It's like, no, you can't be bothered. Like, you don't know what it means to other people to have access. Or people talk about like, oh, when we get back into theatres, we won't need to have a live stream. It's like, well, why don't you want to have another source of revenue or audience? Like, seriously? You only want to have the people who come into the theatre. Like, people can also contribute to, like keeping your theatre going. So if you want to make it in purely economic forms, because
because that's the only thing that seems to mean anything to a lot of people. Yeah. Speaking of economics, I know you've done a lot of work around austerity and combating it and responding to its impact on your life. I don't know if you can speak a little bit about some of those projects.
Yeah, so I think like 2018, I did a project called Resilient and Resisting, which is such a shitty name because I don't actually think that people who are really up against austerity are necessarily always resilient or resisting. But the thing was that the project was originally called Sick Fox. And
and that didn't fly with the Arts Council?
Just Heritage Lottery Fund, even more so, and so we had to like come up with something a little bit more meh.
Well done.
Yeah, I know.
No, I don't think it was a bad title, actually. I thought it was
yeah.
I didn't even think about it.
Yeah. So so originally it was called Sick Fox, and it was people at the intersection of sex work, disability, queerness, kink, and survivorship. And what I noticed, and this again was about socializing online, and at that point I was stuck in bed quite a lot of the time, was that I would see that there were people like me who were isolated, who were having these experiences, but who thought they were alone. And I was like, oh, so there are other people who are having these horrible, like, health assessments about, aimed at denying them the things that they need to have, really. Or there are other people who are having massive trouble with having affordable housing or getting appropriate health care. Or there are lots of sex workers who don't even know other sex workers, and aren't aware of this. Sex work and sex workers are one of the groups where I've seen the most intelligent and insightful critique of work, full stop. Not just sex work, but, like, wow, what is it to labor? What does that mean? What are the conditions of labor? How can people organize or not organize? All of this stuff. So that was when I started to collect those stories with like 16 person-to-person interviews and developed this collaborative writing process where sometimes people would co-write with me, other times people would be like, Jet, do whatever you want, I just think that I trust you, and developed a constellation of stories that talked across these different identity groups. And had like quite a number of live events. Some of them were at Hackney Museum, like they were really great. Also at Bishopsgate Institute. There was an amazing one at the Bishopsgate Institute around the Leather Archive. And we had like these 3 readings from the interviews, and a really interesting kind of constellation of people came together. So there was like some men, like gay leather guys, and then people from maybe like the more fetish scene, and then SM Dykes people, and then like, I don't know, like lots of people, but like maybe like about 60 people, but people who maybe wouldn't come together. And then when we were reading these stories, about this hardcore kind of dyke leather sex, the gay boys' mouths were just like, but it was also at the same time a very gentle environment where it felt that people really were into sharing these contemporary histories and connecting with the idea that our stories are histories. It's not something disconnected from us. It's not about that people have to, achieve something in a mainstream recognized way, but these are like these understories that actually tell about how politics is impacting on people. So it's very much like that, the personal is political, like coming back to this, but always an anecdote, always there's the disability rights activist Dennis Queen is talking about using their wheelchair as a barricade in protests, and how it kind of helps, like that they will move themselves like into the front line, or just powerful stories that perhaps are not expected and could really disappear so easily.
Yeah. I know Charlotte Cooper, and I spoke to Charlotte on my podcast actually, and spoke about genealogies and creating a genealogy of fat activism, and so it's really in keeping with these histories will just disappear if we don't have people reporting them and writing them down and
but also
recording.
That project did reveal how much is lost as well, because people, perhaps younger people who weren't around, don't realise that, Hackney used to be like full of squats, and that Hackney Council had like a £3 million campaign to get rid of squatting. And just I think it is, if you don't know that there was a very recent history when people didn't struggle to pay rents in the same way in London, and the housing situation was not the same, then where do you live from? What do you hope for? Like, I remember the idea being introduced to me that everybody would have the right to affordable permanent housing, and the kind of communities that would be created through that. And it really blew my mind, because the idea of like lifelong housing seemed like such a wild dream that I was just like, and if people never have the hope of that, if they never have the idea of that they don't know the history of how this whole property bubble bullshit has really recently evolved, then they don't have anything to kind of dream from.
So it's a really important project, and all of your work is really inspiring, and and I can't wait to see what you're going to do next. So what do you have anything in the pipeline that you would like to plug, or anything? We've been talking for almost 50 minutes or 45 minutes, so I don't know. I don't want to keep you longer than I don't want to stay longer than my welcome.
So really quickly, I've just finished my book, which is called Peachy, and that's the story of I mean, it's a novel now, but it's about growing up in the late 70s and early 80s in a pretty poor suburb in South Auckland, among a lot of gang violence, being part of a teenage group. Disco is kind of seeding to punk, and it's also about this intense homophobia, rape culture. It's also around the time that homosexuality was made legal, and that I think was one of the very first protests I ever went on. And I guess it's a fictionalized account about my teenage life, and I'm just about to do the line edit on that book, so I'm that close.
So it's very close. That's great.
That's my next.
Congratulations. Yeah. To get to that stage. That sounds really wonderful, and I can't wait to read it. So it's a fictionalized account.
Yeah, very much. There was a point where I had been going through all these terms about like, oh, autofiction is a thing, like this is this term that people use. And then my writing mentor, Kirsty Logan, she's been really great. She was like, look, Jet, if something's got like 1% fiction in it, it's just fiction. And then there was also this really hard point in the book where she was like, okay, just make all of it your story. So like some of it is direct account, other stuff never ever happened, but maybe happened to other people or constellations, and so it did become a novel. And in some ways that made that tough writing easier, because I could step back and start to be like, I'm making a story. Kind of a relief. And that was a really interesting thing in the Survivor Writing Workshop, that I brought this question to the group. Like, we were talking at the end, we were like, has anyone got problems? Have you got things you want to talk to the group about? I was like, I'm really worried. Like, I have the imaginary audience of survivor writers in my head, or just survivors. Like, what if I write this book and it's not all exactly true? And they were like, we don't care. We actually find it much easier to read things that come as fiction a lot of the time, because somehow then we can go into the story and just relate to it in a different way, and there's not the same weight about it. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So that was a real gift from the group for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally identify with that. With what you're saying, it can be it's very there's a lot at stake when you're writing in the first person all the time, and when you're revealing and you're speaking from an authentic position, it can be a relief to fictionalize or have alter egos, or just to have a way of a safety net in a sense.
And performance, is that as well. I don't think it necessarily makes it less genuine, but it's somehow narrowing and honing what's said. Craft is good.
Yes, we haven't talked much about like form and craft, and I think it's because you're so you're so talented, you're so multi-talented and multifaceted, and I'd be curious about what you see, like, is there a formal connection in your approach to different ways of producing art? I don't know, like.
Yeah, but I think I never know what I'm doing, and I have very little formal education in those terms. And I feel that it's always a process of seeing what resources there are, what can be achieved with the resources, what can be achieved with the time. Again, who are you talking to? Because I think that's enormously important, to know who your audience is, or like, it's great when you have an idea of who your audience is. And in terms of craft or formal approach, I think I just had to find my way a lot. And sometimes it's been pure hard work. Like, really, like, someone was talking to me the other day about like, oh, I want to write something and I'm not sure about, other people are so talented. I'm like, oh, fuck that. Just start. Just begin. and, have your own voice, and which is all very well to say to someone else, but I mean, maybe like how torturous that whole process can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I kind of, I'm dubious of the idea of like an innate inborn talent. I think that you can hone these things, but I mean, I don't know, with you do seem to just like launch into things and just and be able to do them, and really well and really kind of engaging ways, which,
Oriana, you haven't seen me in the time I thought I would learn roller skating before a major performance. Not or
I haven't, that's true.
Tap dancing, I was like, oh, yeah, I'll pick up tap dancing. Like, such a ridiculous. So I'm glad that it looks so effortless, but it really isn't. And
did you learn to actually roller skate? Or
no,
did you just...
no. And I was living in
I can say I've got that up on you because I'm a good roller skater.
I hope to see that show. Oriana on
skate.
And your guests have to come in on wheels in some way.
Oh, yeah. That's good. I like
live
that.
on the internet.
Excellent. I like it when we come up with a new idea for my work in in the interviews, which is supposed to be about someone else's. But yeah, that's great. Thank you so much again. So let's. I really, really appreciate you doing this, and I've really enjoyed speaking with you. So let's give it up for Jet Moon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye, everyone.
That's all for my first ever interview with the multi-talented interdisciplinary artist Jet Moon. I hope you enjoyed it and that you're interested in following up with Jet Moon's news. I have a bit of news from them to share with you right now, which is that there's going to be a second incarnation of the Survivors Writing Workshop. That project's going to be continuing on. And also there's a book. Jet Moon is producing a book on the Resilient and Resisting Project. So all that is in progress and all that needs more funding. So if you are looking to fund exciting and worthy art projects, do get in touch with Jet Moon, or if you want to participate in that Survivors Writing Workshop. Also, if you want to be updated on both of those things and any other projects that they're working on, do follow Jet Moon on Instagram or Facebook. I'll put the details in the show notes. Thank you for listening.
Next time on Multiple O's. Next time on Multiple O's.
Next time on Multiple O's, I'll share with you my interview with two members of the Golden Brown Girls, Indrani Ash and Shannon Tamara Lewis. We discuss the imagined futures that their web series, also called The Golden Brown Girls, presents compared to their lived reality in an age of austerity. So austerity is the kind of thread that runs through the interview with Jet Moon through to The Golden Brown Girls. We also discuss their show's centering of women of color protagonists. So that's something to look forward to next time on Multiple O's. Thanks for listening. Thanks for continuing to listen. Thanks for getting to this point in this episode to hear me say, I hope you will accept yourselves unconditionally, your lives and other people, because we're all just fallible human beings.